moving right along with the rest of the show. Before I jump into the topics and before I jump into a comment I had that made me laugh, I want to remind you guys, if you have any questions or comments you want to make on today's show, to use the tip and donations link, GSMCPodcast.net, that you see on your screen. By doing this, I can see your question pop up in my chat box, and that way read it on air and get your guys' thoughts on anything I say or on any of our topics. It's a massive help for this show, and if you would, please use the tip and donations link, GSMCPodcast.net, for helping the show out a little bit here. And in saying that, I did get a comment. I was just having some trouble with my chat box before not showing up. But from Kelsey, are you in a closet? No, Kelsey, I'm not in a closet. I'm actually in front of my closet here. This is where I can get the best lighting, Kelsey. This is where you guys can see me a bit clearer rather than anywhere else in this room. So, no, I am not in one. I am in front of my closet here. But sticking to football and sticking to the next topic we have, Raheem Mostert and this playoff curse that the Miami Dolphins sort of find themselves in. A lot of questions about the Dolphins. Can they move further with all the assets that they have on offense? Tua, now you locked in Jalen Waddle for the foreseeable future. Tyreek Hill, one of, if not the best receiver in the entire NFL. And Raheem Mostert, who really rejuvenated his career, it seemed, last year with leading the NFL in touchdowns and just having a monster season for the Miami Dolphins. Almost close to winning that AFC East title, but they unfortunately gave it up there towards the end. Miami was in a good spot last year to win the division, like I mentioned. It would have been their first one since 2008, but they were 9-3 heading into the last 5 weeks of the year, and they ended up losing the last 3 out of those last 5 games and finished 11-6, tied with the Buffalo Bills, but the Bills obviously had the tiebreaker over them because they beat them there down the stretch. And because you weren't able to close the deal out and close the regular season in a great fashion, you could have won the division and hosted a playoff game, but instead you had to travel to the defending champions Kansas City Chiefs, Arrowhead Stadium, and the rest is history. Not a great performance at all from the offense. Rather than having some sort of home field advantage with the Heat, being down there in Miami, being in your own bed, having everything very good and tailored for you to have the best chance to win, you have to travel to Arrowhead, play in the freezing cold, which I can't even imagine what that feels like. I'm not a cold guy. I'm not a cold weather guy, and just the thought of getting hit over and over again in that football game, there wasn't a lot of passing, so the running backs and the offensive linemen were really going through it, I would have to imagine, and that just did not spell out to be a good situation for the Miami Dolphins, and they obviously lost and continued their playoff drought that has been extended now. Over the last 5 playoff appearances, they've all been one and dones. Their 26-7 loss to the Kansas City Chiefs was the latest one, obviously, and they haven't had a playoff win since the start of this century. Back in 2000 was the last playoff win that the Miami Dolphins have had, and also haven't advanced past the divisional round since 1985. So not very good signs when the Miami Dolphins make the playoffs, or any hope that they could move on just seems to dwindle down because of the history of what history tells us recently. So how can they finally get over that? What can they do? What more can they do than have one of the best offenses, one of the most explosive and exciting offenses in the NFL? Well, running back Raheem Mostert had his best year last year, like I mentioned, and he talked about it earlier this season and how they ended last season and how that could sort of help them moving into next year now. He said, "We're an outstanding team, and it has to just click at the end of the year. I was telling the reporters, man, I take an 0-8 start to make it deep into the playoffs, right? And trying to get to the championship round. One of our biggest kryptonites has always been that first round." And he also emphasized how everyone having the mentality towards the end of the year was something else that he took notice of, and just something that everybody needs to correct once it really becomes crunch time and once it really gets to the nitty gritty and you have to put out your best performances, or else it not to say that the whole regular season and everything you've done goes to waste, but it certainly almost feels like that when you put in the work, you've put in the work to have a great record, and then the first round comes, and not only do you feel like you've let everybody down, but you feel even worse because you had it in your hands and you let that slip by, but you still made the playoffs and you found yourself in a tougher situation, and you just can't recover from that mentally. Again, like he mentioned, it really just checks you out at that moment because you're let down for not winning the division. Now you have to travel to Arrowhead, and you're just not in it mentally. And also the injuries that they had as well. Jalen Waddle didn't play in that playoff game against the Kansas City Chiefs, so that's another thing. And on the topic of home field advantage, having the division in your hands stings even more because the last three of the last five playoff losses that they've had have been on the road. So other than those two other losses that were at home to the Baltimore Ravens, which isn't something to be too ashamed of in those early 2000 Baltimore Ravens, one of their best teams in recent memory. Those defenses were off the charts. So those, people can give you a pass on, but the other three were on the road. So just emphasizing more of that home field advantage that I really think the Dolphins need, especially to just get over the hump. To get over that hump. If you're at home, it gives you the best chance to at least, have a sigh of relief and have the best chance. If you win that game, it's the weight is off your shoulders a little bit, and that gives you a bit more confidence to maybe next time when you are in a situation where you're on the road, maybe you have more confidence now because you've at least already done it at home in a playoff game. So to get over the hump and finally break that curse, they're definitely going to be having to play at home, in my opinion. And my sort of doubts around the whole situation really just has to do more with consistency rather than just having the mentality and just be clicking at the same time there towards the end. To me, consistency with this Dolphins team is the biggest thing, just because it's one thing to stay healthy and have the momentum right at the right time, right? Like Raheem Mostert alluded to, but there were some games where they were ugly games where the Dolphins only put up 14 and 19 points, and they had an easier schedule last year rather than this year, where towards the tail end of that, they could find themselves in a similar situation where they have a gauntlet of teams that they play. I know that they have the Packers in there. I think they have the Houston Texans in there. The Bills they might have twice, and the New York Jets. So the end of season in 2024 is not going to be any easier than it was last year. So of course you want to be clicking all at the same time, but I think the consistency with this team and showing it at all points of the season, not just starting 0-8 and then clicking there towards the end. There are still doubts around those teams that do that. And also starting very well like they did and then dying off towards the end. Again, it all has to do with consistency and maybe not rattling off 6 wins towards the end or having a bad losing streak in there, but maybe stacking up 3 to 4 wins, then maybe you lose a couple, 1 or 2, then you stack up some more, lose one, win another one, sort of like that, having it be staggered rather than really great start and then drop off towards the end, or really bad start and then you found something to really ride into the playoffs. I still don't think that's the best situation for me, just because can you trust that if you found it so late and then just hope that it continues on in the playoffs where that level of talent just spikes up tremendously? That's how I feel about it, and this consistency around this Miami Dolphins team. Is it more so about just finishing and having the mentality rather than trying to carry the consistency of the playing level at all points in the season? Because at some points, like I mentioned, the level of play from the Dolphins wasn't up to standard, and I just don't think they could rely on that to just click and expect it just because they have great players on the offensive side of the ball. But that's just me. Those are the comments Raheem Mostert said. They're oddly enough my favorite to win that division. Based on everything I just said, I think they have a good chance of doing it. Last year was sort of a trial run a little bit of having a legit team. Now I have confidence in Tua and this team. They're too good not to get it done. They're my pick to win that division. So if they can apply some of these things, I think they'll be in a good spot to do it in 2024. But in saying that, we'll move on from that discussion and wrap up the show with one more segment we have coming up after the break. The New England Patriots using some virtual reality in their preparation to get Drake May up to speed and getting him NFL ready. What are my thoughts on it? What are other people saying about it? And could this be something that could be incorporated elsewhere around the NFL if it goes well? Stick around to find out more on that topic. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.